All right, everyone, come on in close enough so you can hear me. If you can hear me from down there, you can stay right where you're at. Basically, what this is the only, we have two off-site satellite buildings with Drew Estate. We have this building, which is our primary pre-industry and tobacco bodega, and this is where we do the sorting of the crops, and this is where we do the building of the pilones, and this is also where we do the long-term aging of materials in this facility. The second facility that's off-site has to do with how we do the infusion process for the cigars. And then, of course, you guys have been in the larger facility, which we're going to go back to after here. What these ladies are doing right now is when you get the tobacco, whether you buy it directly from a farmer or from a broker or whether you buy it from an intermediary, every single leaf that comes in, before it can be put into a pilone, needs to be opened, inspected, and graded. It needs to be graded for color, it needs to be graded for texture, it needs to be graded for thickness, it needs to be graded for length. This tobacco that you're looking at here is tobacco that has been partially fermented, okay? It's depending on what you get. Sometimes you get tobacco directly from the barn, which has just been cured. Other times you get tobaccos that are already gone through a first fermentation and you're doing the second fermentation. Other times you get tobaccos that have actually gone through the first two fermentations and you're really just going to do a touch-up fermentation on it. So it depends on what the variety of the tobacco is. So what tobacco do you think is on the table now? If you had to guess. Yeah?
Dago Majero.
I know what it is. Okay. What this is this is the T52 wrapper. This is stock cut Habano that you're looking at. And the reason you can tell that very quickly is this isn't even close to the shape of a broadleaf. It may have some of the same color, but it doesn't have the same texture, it doesn't have the same grain, it doesn't have the same vein structure. But the point is, I mean, every leaf though, before we can even put it into a pilone, we must make sure that all like leaves are put together. Because when you do the fermentation process, which we'll go into in the other room, if we inadvertently put a leaf that's a little too thin and with leaves that are too thick, it will become over fermented. And vice versa, if you have leaves in a bulk that are too thick, and they won't ferment enough. So you must take every piece of tobacco and feel it individually. And so what they're doing right now is they're not actually doing the sorting. They're just opening and cracking this tobacco out for the most part on this end so they can start to go through it. Whereas you can see this lady here, she's taking each place and she's putting it into 3 piles depending on the texture. And you can feel the texture. Feel this leaf, pass it around. Pass that down. All right, now give me that one back.
Rougher. It's like it's good.
And compare it to these leaves.
No, these are painted. Give them back.
We can sort them out. I know what they are. But do you feel the difference in the weight of that leaf? Now in this leaf, there's a very distinct difference. It's very easy to feel because it's a very heavy tobacco. Okay? But in some leaves, the difference is almost imperceptible. And it really takes somebody that spends 2-3 years of handling leaves all day long to notice the slight differences, particularly when you start getting into like Ecuador Habanos or you start getting into your Connecticut shades, anything that's got a lighter texture to it, and even some of your thinner Habanos can be that way. So it just depends on what the variety is as to how difficult it is to sort this tobacco. So that's essentially what they're doing. Now, this is going to happen multiple times in the process. This tobacco is initially getting this initial sort to build the initial pilone. But this tobacco, after it's in the pulons, is going to come back to the table as many as 6 or 7 times to be resorted yet again, to get the varying grades of where it stands in the fermentation process. And I mean, this is what these ladies do every day, non-stop. On the variety of tobacco, you could take a Pilado Cubano Ligero, and it's pretty much not even as heavy as most Esteli grown Secos. So the fact that it's Seco, or the fact that it's Viso, or the fact that it's Ligero, is only relative to that particular plant strain grown in a particular area. Because you can take like even a Connecticut seed. A Connecticut seed that's grown in the U.S. is much thinner than a Connecticut seed that's grown in Ecuador, okay, and vice versa. And the same thing even here locally in Nicaragua. What will end up happening is the tobaccos that we purchase from Esteli are distinctly different than the Nicaraguan tobaccos bought in Condega, distinctly different than the tobaccos bought in Jalapa. You know, the Jalapa is a bit more fine, it's a little bit smoother, it's a bit thinner. Tobaccos in Esteli are much coarser, much rougher, and Condega seems to split the two. But again, that's really just a typical. You know, it's not a for sure, not a for certain, because it always depends on the individual crop. So you can end up with something that's much thicker, much heavier, much greater oils, darker colors, coming out of a shade grown, well, not a shade grown, but out of a sun grown in Jalapa, end up having more body than a leaf that's grown here locally in Esteli. And that's why it's so critical that you just can't take what the farmer tells you and use it as is. You have to go through this process yourself and make up these individual gavillas of 50 similar leaves so that when we bulk them, they ferment evenly.